Yeah.
Well, what would you say?
We aren't privy to that. Only the buyer is.
Well, question. To what? Privy to what? Is this gonna be the only trip that the FHA appraiser makes out here?
Don't know.
Don't know. You don't know how they operate.
Well, there's other things to consider, and I'm gonna go through that this morning. So, raise your question at that time, but I think I will answer your question. All right, so, gotta review this. I know it's not, this isn't Bible study again, but we have to review some of the developments that have transpired this week. Well, first of all, in case there's anybody who has not yet heard, the purchase agreement we had has completely fallen through. It is off the table. We are no longer under contract, and this buyer is gone. So, now I'm gonna pass out some financial stuff to you. I'm gonna do one at a time. So the one that I just passed out to those in attendance here is the one that at the top, the first box there says options for recurring tab. And then the second box, options for building cost reductions. Whose phone is that, Pleasant? Not mine. Okay, so
The reverb is back.
the reverb is back. I might have to tune down a little on the volume. Yep, it's up pretty high. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I see. This one is. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that okay?
Says that there was an echo.
Yeah. So sometimes the audio completely shuts off, and sometimes it turns on 2 or 3 different sources of audio. Well, 2. We got the overhead mic, and then we got the camera mic. So I always have to have one of those off. And hopefully I just took care of that problem. But somebody will buzz if that's not the case. So this happened on Tuesday that we found out the buyer's financing fell through.
Good now.
Good now, okay. And my initial reaction was, oh, no, not again. And about 30 minutes after that, I said, okay, it's no good to sit and sulk about this. Figure it out. Figure out what we haven't figured out yet. Well, Chuck and I have been working with Jeff Radical on presenting various options for our relocation. And that's what you have before you here. You can see the first set of boxes deal with mortgage amounts. Buy a house only, that would be, okay, we're not gonna do anything about a church here. Pastor will be basically a traveling missionary at large to the southeast. That's that kind of concept. So we would need a $250,000 mortgage. And see how that would go. The next option is, okay, we could do that and rent a church, and see how that turns out. The next one is buy a house and a church with a $350,000 mortgage. That is, find a piece of property that has a building on it that would have a church, and hopefully we could get it for $350,000 mortgage. The next one is, okay, what if we couldn't get one for $350,000? It's a $450,000 mortgage. So these are the expectations for what it would cost. And then we thought, okay, well, what if we did the buy a parsonage and build a church, like on that land just down here? There's no building already on it, but do we have enough money on the sale of this property to build one? Well, you have there the 40 by 60 building, and then you have the 30 by 50 building. So that's a possibility. Then you have the next column is buy a parsonage and rent a church. And then you have rent a parsonage, rent a church. Now you'll notice the bottom numbers there on each of those columns. Projected total, $415,000. On the first two, we just took that number based off of that property down the road that we looked at, if we were to buy a property like that. The next one is using a property like that and then going ahead and building the church now, and you see how the numbers go there. They're pretty big. These are year one expenses. Okay? And so we had all of this figured out going into the sale of the property, and the one that we were really looking at that the voters said, okay, let's try this approach, is the one where we buy the parsonage and rent the church. And that one is the one that for the first year would be a $429,450 one first year expense. But when Tuesday hit, and none of those are an option at this point, unless we were to get a new buyer, I just said, okay, what else can we do? So I just sat down and I said, you know what we haven't gone through is the idea that we had before. What if we just stay here and build here? What would that look like on this same spreadsheet? And you see the spreadsheet here. The answer is it comes to $173,889 for a one-time expense. And then we had a meeting with Joel Kraft and Jeff Radical of the Mission Board, both of them, the chairman and then our liaison, and they liked that. They said, like, wow, that looks pretty good, actually. And then Joel said, well, what about that other building, the barn? The building you guys call the barn, how does that come out? And my initial reaction was, I said, Jeff or Joel, I don't think it can come out as good as building the steel building, but I will dig into it and see what the price is. So I did that, and you can see there, the cost to do that ends up being about $7,000 less. Now this is barring any major issue, like you'd have to have a structural engineer come in and take a look at it. You know, if you found some sloughing or some heaving in the foundation, that would make that a no-go. Anyways, so both Joel and Jeff, when they looked at that, they were amazed by it, and they started liking it. Now, so this is just a one-time expense expenditure, and you can see how much lower those two are than most of the other ones. And so that by itself kind of caught everyone's attention. But now I've got another sheet to hand you, and this is the one that just kind of made us rethink everything as far as reselling. Now, this is what it would do to an annual budget. This is all these same options again. Adding those last two, because we already had everything else except those last two. Now, the benefit of selling the property and relocating is that suddenly we have a bunch of extra money in the bank that we can go and do something else. If we don't sell the property, we don't have a bunch of extra money to do anything. But then you look at what it does to the budget annually. Look at, it's the second line from the bottom. Subsidy required versus subsidy given. Basically, that's saying, okay, right now you guys are getting $500 a month, that's $6,000 across the board. But you're negative, you're gonna go negative each year. The first one is $7,086. The one after that is $32,000. Now, what amazed me is the one that was the worst as far as deficit spending is the one that we were actually planning on doing. And that is the one where it says buy house with a loan of $350,000 and rent the worship facility. See what that annual deficit is? $37,000. If you do the math on that, after putting down a down payment on a $415,000 piece of property and paying mortgage or paying rent on a place to have a worship service and other activities, that would only give us 2.5 years to 3 years at most before we would be out of money. And we'd be right back in the same situation again. And so that was kind of shocking. And all of them are deficit spending, but look at the two that are the absolute least in deficit spending, and you will see that that's the two that have us remaining here on the property and either building or renovating the barn. Now the question then is, not from the perspective of how much money do you have that you can put toward it, but which one is going to be more cost effective in actuality? And you can see the answer here is one of those two.
And it's cost effective, and the block building is going to be much stronger than the steel building that we put up or something.
So that's another debate to be had, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So both Joel and Jeff have said, guys, these really look like your best options. One of these two. To either build a steel building church here or to renovate the barn. Now that begs the question. What question does it beg? Well, look at what it costs to do them. If you go back to the page I gave you the first time, one is $171,000 and the other one's $160,000. Where are you going to get the money to do that? You don't have any. But when those two representatives of the Board of Missions saw that, they're like, that might be the thing that we have to get behind with the Board of Trustees. Now, we still have to have a conversation with the Board of Missions about this, with the whole Board of Missions. But I think it's important for everybody to realize that that there's been this monumental shift in thinking with the two that we've been working with. And their monumental shift in thinking is, okay, maybe you guys have been right all along, that this is the place for you to stay. And if the other two Board of Missions members ends up agreeing with that, or even if, I can't say absolutely that Joel and Jeff are saying, yeah, let's go these approaches, but they can see the numbers, and the numbers are saying, these look like the best options for you guys. One of the things that they had to get right on in their thinking, the Board of Missions has always held the idea that the problem is with the property here, that we can't build a church on it, even though we've requested to several times. They never quite had clear in their minds that we can get a conditional use permit on this property. And the reason it finally got clarified to them is they wanted to make sure that any property we would go and purchase after we sold this place already had a conditional use permit on it. And then I had to explain to them, that's not the way it works. The owner has to get conditional use permit. And they're like, so you can't just go and buy a property that is already allowed to put a church on it? I'm like, yeah, you can do that, but then it's commercial property, and then the price skyrockets. Look at the commercial property around Loganville. An acre of land is going for minimum $1 million. But as long as it is served with the right type of road, you can get a conditional use permit for a piece of property. And this is one of them. So once that registered in their mind, and then I presented this, they're like, okay, so the problem's not the property, the problem is you don't have a building. And that's the correct answer. So how do we best resolve that? Well, that led us to another discussion of, do you need to have a building? And the answer to that question is, well, if you're going to do corporate outreach, yes. We're not allowed to do that until we have a place of assembly. That was another point that we had to discuss pretty, what's the right word? Not aggressively, in depth. This was Thursday night, we met. Joel was certain that we could do pretty much about anything we wanted to do, even without a church. And we had to stress to him, that's not true. There's a lot of things that we're not allowed to do because we don't have a place of assembly. One is to go out and invite the general public to join us for worship. Another is to go out and advertise ourselves as an established church in Walton County. We can't do that. We can't so much as put a sign out front saying, hey, we're going to have church services if anybody accidentally happens to show up at the right time. We can't do that. And so that's been kind of a sticking point too. The mission board has had this understanding of our situation for the past 5.5 years, that we're just thinking, if we build it, they will come, which isn't our thinking. Our thinking is, there's a lot that we can't do because we don't have it. And that's what we want to do. So I visited with Jeff a little bit more yesterday, just he and I, and he says, okay, Pastor Gantt, what you guys need to do that will significantly help our discussions on the Board of Missions is find something you can do and do it. That will demonstrate to everyone that you guys aren't just wanting a building and think because you have a building, everybody's going to start showing up. Do something. And I said, well, we have been doing something. We gave them a list of things that we have done. But they wanna see something more effort on Zion's part. And that would take away that perspective of the situation. So that the next time we have a meeting, we can say, look, here's the thing that they ask us what you guys doing to help grow. And the answer to that question is, there's nothing we can do to help Zion grow right now. But there's things we can do to reach out with the gospel. So we're gonna be working on that. Coming up with, we already have the online ads that go out to Facebook and Snapchat and what's the other one? FaceTime? Instagram, thank you. FaceTime, that's the one nobody knows about. But, so those ads already go out. We can broaden that. Kendra and I were talking yesterday, Loganville has a Fall Fest and a Christmas celebration. And we can't go out and hand out pamphlets saying, come to Zion, but we can go out and hand out pamphlets that present the gospel very clearly, and then a phone number on the back that says, hey, if you want more information, call, and then we can talk to people face to face. So there's some things we can do, and if we do those, that takes away that perspective from the Board of Missions, that we're just sitting back until we have a church, we're not gonna do anything, we're just gonna build a church and that's gonna be our outreach. That's the perspective they have right now. But in my conversation with Jeff, and he's not speaking in absolutes, he's speaking in terms of what is financially best here. It's one of these two items at the last two columns. And Joel agreed with that those two look like the best option. And if they get behind it, then if the mission board gets behind it, then where does the money come from? Where's the money at, Caleb asked? Then they can go to the Board of Trustees and say, hey, we're wanting to do this project, and we're now the co-signers of this additional loan. So, we'll see how it works out. But what Jeff wants us to do as a congregation is to decide between these two choices. And so next week, Mark, we need to recall the voters meeting to do that. But right now is the time to discuss that. I mean, if you have any questions about what all is entailed in it, well, I'm going to give you a couple of things. So the prices you have here in this column on that first page, that first page that I handed you, that is if we build a 30 by 50 building. Do some quick math. What's the square footage of a 30 by 50 building? 1,500 square feet. Okay? And with the new building, you have all kinds of advantages. For example, initially there shouldn't be very much maintenance because it's all brand new, right? You get to choose the exact location you want to put it. I don't know, you can think of some other advantages. You can figure out exactly what the interior layout is going to look like.
Even with that one, still gonna cost money to design the interior how you want, and you can still do that in that building, because pretty much all you need is the 4 walls. And so you're still confined to 4 walls. You could move walls, and that would be a little bit more money, but you still have that same option.
Right. So that's the one side. Having spoken with General Steel, it would be at least 6 months before we would get the steel delivered. Okay, so That would be the time frame. Now, let's look at the remodel, the one that's 7,000 less, but we don't know what we would find once we got a structural engineer in there. So that puts a little con up right away, doesn't it? The one con is, okay, if you pay the money for the structural engineer, and he says, okay, this whole southeast corner wall is about to fall. And that makes that no longer tenable. You just spent $12,500 on a structural engineer to come and tell you, you can't do the barn. And then that cost would have to get rolled into the other option, right? But there's the other side of it. Like Jediah said, it is a block building. It is long-term, in that way, more sturdy. There's another thing. The building, I had completely forgotten the measurements on that building. I was thinking it was like a 35 by 60 or 35 by 70 building. It's not. It is actually a 28 by 38 building, which seems much smaller than a 30 by 50 until you realize, wait, there's 2 floors and there's a lean-to. And when you do the math on that, you come out with almost exactly twice the square footage. So instead of 1,500 square foot, where all you would have, and I'm not saying you shouldn't go that direction, that's for the congregation to decide. All you would have on a 30 by 50 is essentially a sanctuary a little bit bigger than this, a little bit of an entryway, and then a couple of handicap restrooms. It doesn't really provide you with the room to put another Sunday school room, for example, or a little kitchen area, fellowship area. There's just not that much room in a 30 by 50. You got another, from this, you have another 20 feet. That's what you have. So it's not a lot of room to do much else, other than have a sanctuary about this size and like I said, the 2 restrooms and a little bit of an entryway. But on a 28 by 38, that seems small, but you could do the same thing there. You walk in, I mean, it would take some design, and you could put a couple of restrooms on that first floor and then build a dividing wall and still have that sanctuary of basically 30 by 38 or 30 by 30 and have a couple of restrooms and then stairs descending into 2 other rooms, right? Because there's 2 rooms in the immediate downstairs. And then you can also cut a wall into the lean-to area that could now become a kitchenette. So it's just, there's all kinds of possibilities. And so you guys got to figure out which ones are the right ones to go. Now, what has to be done to the barn to remodel it? Nope, I'll tell you.
Everything with the blocks.
Pretty much, and the floor, right? The floor that separates the 2. Now, if the structural engineer comes in and says, hey, that floor is kind of iffy, it's got to go, well, suddenly the price checks way up. But I spent a lot of time on Thursday finding the cost of what all we need. So because there's electrical wiring behind all the sheetrock, all the sheetrock has to come out. Okay. Essentially, the entire roof has to be taken off, and that is down to there's not rafters over there. It's 2 long beams and then pieces leaned up against it, and then boards over the top. So that all has to come off. And then once you have all of that off, remember the sidewalls are only like this high over there. So then you would wanna raise that up to get to a regular height wall. It's not a difficult job, but it's something that has to be done, to make it actually usable.
Is there a problem putting old bricks on top of, or new bricks on top of old bricks? Is there a structure?
The easier way is just to use 2x material and stud it up.
Okay.
So you need to raise that at least another 3 feet, but probably closer to 4 feet all the way around. Then put trusses on it, then sheeting, then shingles. And you have the prices on that first sheet I gave you that tells you what that would cost. Now, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. Let's see. Demolition and disposal, that's the first one. I got $14,000 there. That's to get a crew in there to take off the entire roof. And then volunteer to go in and take out the sheetrock and the wiring, which isn't a hard job, but, so 14,000, the other big number is the 24,100. That's how much it would cost. I figured for that length of a building, you need 23 trusses. The average cost on just simple truss, I think it came in at like $650 a piece, because they're 20, well, they'd have to be 30 feet long. So it's $650 a piece. Okay, and then you've got sheeting that would have to go in place. And then you would have shingling that would have to get put in place. So that's why that number is 24,000. But that number can come way down if we had a crew, both the demolition and disposal as well as the roof replace, could come way down if we had a crew of volunteers, experienced volunteers.
I have two separate questions. One is, what if we look at a tin roof
That's what I was about to say.
Steel roof,
instead of?
you still have to have the rafters,
I
you still,
understand
or
that,
the
is there a
trusses.
cost cut in
No, it's actually more expensive,
that? Okay,
it's less time,
right.
but it's more expensive.
And then that's my second question is, you talked about the time on the erection of the steel building. What is the time, what's the time for the?
That we could get to right away and be done within 6 months. You know, as soon as we had the conditional use permit. So to get the conditional use permit, you first have to get the structural engineer in here to draw up plans on what to do to remodel that building. You would also have to get another engineer in here to see what needs to be done as far as drainage. And then you've got 3 months of going through the process of getting the conditional use permit. As soon as the conditional use permit, as soon as that were to go through, we could immediately say, let's start. And like I said, within 6 months, it could be done.
We have on the HVAC $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
What's there usable now? What do we know about it?
What's that?
What's down there now? What's usable?
That is
What do you know?
It's one of those standalone systems. So you got the little compressor condenser outside, and then there's a big blower that contains the coils inside. It's very similar to any other home system, except now you got one that's standing out in the open. It's not duct, it's just one single unit that's blowing into the room. Those tend to be, for church purposes, tend to be somewhat loud. And then you don't get it to the other floors. Other than that, there's nothing in there.
And are all these numbers plus or minus? I mean, some are for sure in stone, but.
Well, I'm confident in my numbers,
Okay.
just because I don't pull them out of thin air. I go online, I do research. I ask professionals that do it, what would you charge for this? So my numbers are pretty firm.
Okay.
And then I round them up.
Oh, okay.
And then we add 15% just to make sure. That's what the second from the bottom is on that second page I gave you. You got 15% contingency. That's to make sure you've
Covered all bases.
got enough money there to do your project.
Okay.
I think the reality is we could probably, if things go very well, I think we could probably do the barn remodel for closer to 115. And that includes, that would then be volunteer labor on the roof too. And but it would include also the turn lane in a small parking lot. But that's if everything goes very well.
Is it a requirement to have a asphalt parking lot?
It has to be a hard surface, so it can't just be gravel.
It cannot be gravel, okay.
Now, there's a certain, the size of your hard parking lot is determined by your occupancy. Your occupancy is gonna be determined by square footage of the biggest room in the building. That's what determines your occupancy. So that room isn't gonna be a whole lot bigger than this by the time you put a dividing wall and a bathroom in. It would be big enough to house all of us, big enough to have more people, if the Lord grants growth. But it's not gonna be a giant sanctuary.
So, if you kept with that plan of the actual sanctuary itself being the size of, about the size of this, and you build the parking lot according to that square footage, if you then we grow enough, and we take down those walls, decide to remodel the whole top to the sanctuary, and then put those down in the basement, then you have to change the parking lot, or is it when everything's established?
Well, part of the thing with the parking lot is you have to have handicap parking, and handicap parking has to be within a certain distance of the building. Okay, so that's part of it. So you got room that you could move back a little bit, but you still have to have handicap accessible restroom. So you can't just go in, you can't just say, we want more space in the church, in the sanctuary now, so let's get rid of those bathrooms. You're not gonna be able to do that. So once those bathrooms are there, that's where those bathrooms are. And to have an expanded sanctuary, would later on require an addition. Okay? But, I think the number is seven square feet per person is what's considered, occupancy. That's the number that's sticking in my head, 7 square feet per person. So what does that give you on a 28 by 30? Well, that's 30 by 30, that's 900 divided by 7.
15 square feet is 75 people.
15 square feet, 75 people. Huh?
But right here.
Right where?
You have in top second sheet.
Huh?
Top right is second sheet. Oh,
I didn't put that number anywhere on there.
15 square feet, 75 people equals 1,125 square feet.
Oh, okay, so you need 15 square feet per person.
Yeah, okay.
So 1,125 would, so basically you have 28 by 30, that would give you close to 900 square feet. Divide that by 15, you're gonna have about, you're gonna be able to get about 60 people in that area. Now, that gets kind of crowded, but, I mean, look at here, this room right here is 24 by 27, so a little bit smaller. And there's a whole bunch of space back there that's not being used, right? And we've got this pretty wide right here. You could easily put another 3 rows in here from what we have. And what we have in here right now is what, 34 chairs that are out, I think. If you got 2 more rows, you could get 60 people in here and be comfortable. So that leaves room for growth. Chuck mentioned something too, in talking with him the other day. He goes, well, there's also, you can go a ways before you have to do an add-on, and that's simply by doing what Messiah does. Have multiple services. You can have a 8 o'clock service, and then you can have a 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock service. So it's not as though you have to immediately, just because you end up with now 61 people, oh, we gotta do a building program. A couple other things that Chuck Brent brought up, down the road expansion, okay? Which of the 2 options is easier for expansion? A steel building is famous for easily being able to expand. You just gotta open up the gable end, pour some concrete, and throw some more steel up, right? So that would be really easy to expand if you need a larger size sanctuary. If we were to renovate, we can't build that direction from the barn, because you're getting into floodplain at that point. But you could build this way. And frankly, that would be pretty much the same process at that point. You would just pour some concrete, and then instead of steel, you'd put up a stick. Either one of them's, I think, easily doable. Drain field, Chuck brought up the drain field, because the nice thing about the barn is it already has a septic tank and a drain field. Now, we don't know what shape it's in right now. But generally, if you don't use it for a while, that gives the ground a chance to absorb what has been going into it, and it should be operational, but that would need to be tested. Down the road mission outreach. I don't know how that thought plays into the distinction between the two. The one thing that, there's the other distinction between the two buildings, the new steel versus the barn, that I think might be worth taking into account is the fact the steel building, 30 by 50, there's no Sunday school area at all. There's just not enough room. Whereas the barn has lots of room for Sunday school.
The church in South Carolina, if I'm thinking about this correctly, where they have Sunday school and where the actual church building itself is are separate, correct?
Yep.
So is there anything stopping us if we did go steel route? Could we use this as Sunday school?
No, for the exact same
Same
reason we're
purpose,
not,
we
we can't use it as a church. Right.
Yeah, their school is an established school.
There's another thing to take into account. Jeff brought this up in our discussions yesterday. He says, you know, if you do go with the steel building, now you've got a question of liability on that barn. You might need to add a line item to what it would cost to do the steel building here on getting that barn demolished before you end up somebody getting hurt and you getting sued. So I don't know what that would cost. I haven't dug into it, but my guess to have it knocked over and hauled away, and by the time you pay the dump fee, I'm thinking you're probably going to add about another $20,000 to $25,000 on that. So, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, and I'm not even saying we even can do the barn, because I don't know until a structural engineer would look at it. But, so that bottom line, that 173, is likely, it would need to go up to closer to 200,000 when you take that into account. I'm excited because I'm seeing a light at the end of the tunnel here that we haven't seen for a while. I'm excited that well, I'm excited partly that, you know, this property that we saw so much potential in, now there's a possibility that that potential can be realized. I'm not saying how it is going to turn out, but I can see the hopes that we had for how it might turn out are still very much on the table. And I'm excited to get to work doing the thing for which you called me down here to do. Any questions or comments? So, Mark, can you announce to everyone that the voters' meeting will be recalled next Sunday?
Okay? The voter meeting be recalled next Sunday.
And in the meantime, I don't know how you're gonna go about it, but if you have any questions or comments about either of those two proposals, because Jeff would like to see us as a congregation decide which one we would rather do. If you have questions or comments, you can call me or email me or text me, and I'll just put it out to all the members, your questions or your comments as they come in, so everybody can benefit from it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to talk about it a lot next Sunday in the recalled voters meeting to decide. I know Alan will probably have some thoughts as, you know, having done engineering work. But everybody everybody has something to say. So if you have something to say, say it. All right, we'll stop here.